Hi friends, welcome back. By now, many of you have been in your homes with your family or loved ones for a few weeks, and you may or may not be experiencing some difficult emotions and some difficult thoughts, and really having to utilize those skills that we went over in our other videos. So today we are going to talk a little bit more about some skills that can be helpful, specifically skills that can be helpful related to family relationships or relationships in general. In being in the house with your family and not really being able to leave, that can create some conflict and it can create some opportunities for increased communication and stronger relationships. So we're going to go over some skills today that have to do with family relationships. And the first one is mindfulness. So some of you may know that there are 4 modules or parts of DBT. That is emotion regulation, distress tolerance, interpersonal effectiveness, and mindfulness. And mindfulness is a skill that we teach you to use throughout. So when you are using skills to regulate your emotions or have healthy relationships or navigate crisis in safe and healthy ways, you also want to be using mindfulness skills throughout. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what that means and what that can look like, both within yourself and your family systems. So first, we're going to go over just some key definitions, which are important when we start to talk about mindfulness. What is that? Mindfulness is the act of consciously focusing the mind in the present moment without judgment and without attachment to the moment. So simply just being, right? We're sitting in the moment and we're being present in those moments as they pass by and not attaching to those moments. Mindfulness practice is the repeated effort of bringing the mind back to awareness of the present moment without judgment and other attachment. And meditation is the practice of mindfulness while sitting or standing quietly for a period of time. And so some of you might have your own mindfulness or meditation practice, and for some of you, this might be completely new. And if it is, that's okay, because today we're going to talk about it. Before we get into mindfulness, we're going to talk a little bit about the goals of mindfulness, and we're going to talk a little bit about the different states of mind, which are really, really important in DBT and thus in life in general. So when we talk about the goals of mindfulness, there are 3 main goals. The first goal is to reduce suffering and increase happiness. So we want to learn how to limit pain and stress. We are not going to get rid of it because life is something that has painful events in it, but we do want to reduce our suffering, right? We also want to increase control of your mind. How many of you have ever felt that your mind is in control of you, or that you do not have control over your thoughts? That can be really, really difficult. And it's something that many of us experience or have experienced in our lifetimes. And so when we talk about mindfulness, we want to learn how to take control of our mind and take control of our thoughts. And then the third goal is to experience reality as it is, living our lives with our eyes wide open and experiencing the reality of your connection to the universe and the essential goodness. We talk a lot about interconnectedness in mindfulness and DBT, and the idea that we all are connected in some way, and our actions and our behaviors impact others. So when we talk about mindfulness, we also want to talk about the 3 different states of mind, which many of you have probably heard of. So we have our emotion mind, we have our reasonable mind, or also known as our rational mind, and then we have our wise mind, which is the synthesis of the 2. And all 3 states of mind are very, very important. And what we want to learn to do is get to that synthesis, which is our wise mind. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about reasonable or rational mind. Our rational mind is cool, rational, and task-focused. So this is the part of your mind that's going to really help you get things done and focus on the facts. So when we are in reasonable mind, we're ruled by facts, reason, logic, and pragmatics. Our values and our feelings are not important here. So some things that might be a part of rational mind, or some professions rather, could be an accountant or a lawyer, right? Some of those things that are more task and fact focused.
And right now in this pandemic time, these might be the individuals who are kind of focused on, this hasn't really hit Maryland yet the way that it has hit New York. It hasn't hit Virginia yet the way it's hit New York. Like, we are still okay. Like, let's focus on that. And just kind of riding it out. And so just being aware of, we might think we might be an emotion mind or wise mind, and if that's kind of where our headspace is, we might actually be in our reasonable, rational, logical mind.
Thanks, Bree. When we look at emotion mind, this is where we feel and express our emotions. So emotion mind can be hot, mood dependent, and emotion focused. This is really the mind that we're in when we are feeling those feels, right? When we are really experiencing our emotions. And sometimes in this space, we might have a difficult time regulating our emotions, or we might act impulsively or lead with our emotions rather than facts or logic. So when we're in emotion mind, we're ruled by our moods, our feelings, and our urges to do or say things. Facts, reason, and logic are not important. This is a very important space as well, because in our emotion mind is where we feel our emotions, right? And learn to express our emotions. And as we learn in DBT, all emotions have functions, and they are very important to recognize and learn how to express effectively. And so what we want to eventually get to is the synthesis of the two, which is a balance between reasonable mind and emotion mind. When we think about professions that are in emotion mind, this is where we live sometimes, right? Therapists can be in emotion mind, right? Because we really want to pay attention to your feelings. We're paying attention to our feelings, right? So there are a lot of benefits about being in emotion mind, and emotion mind is really, really important. As Bree was talking about related to the pandemic, this space could look like really, really worrying about the future, having future-oriented thoughts, not knowing where the future, or what the future holds rather, and where we're going to be next week, next month, or even later this year. And so this space right now could be difficult for a lot of people. And so where we want to get to, like I said, is our wise mind. Our wise mind is the wisdom within each person, and it is the balance of the two. We talk a lot in DBT about dialectics, the idea that these opposing forces can coexist together, or the fact that things that seem like opposites can both be true. And so this is really relatable when we talk about wise mind, because emotion mind and reasonable mind can exist simultaneously. And so wise mind is seeing the value of both reason and emotion, bringing our left brain and our right brain together, and finding the middle path, which we talk about a lot, and we'll talk a little bit more about later today. So before we get into mindfulness, it is important to understand the different states of mind. They each are valuable, they each are important, and we need to learn how to be in each space safely and effectively. Okay, so now we're going to get into the mindfulness skills. So there are two skills in mindfulness with other skills within them, and what they are the what and the how skills. So what do I do when I'm practicing mindfulness skills, and how do I do it? And so when we talk about what do, we talk about observing, describing, and participating. These are the core skills when we practice mindfulness. We want to observe and notice, without putting words on things, what is going on around us and what is going on within us. We want to describe by putting words on the experience. We want to use non-judgmental language. We want to really stick to the facts and describe what is going on, again, within us, within our families, within these relationships, or within the present moment. And then participating, letting go and fully throwing ourselves into the experience. So this might look like kind of getting rid of all distractions that are in your space and really fully participating in the moment. An example that I often like to use when we talk about mindfulness skills within families or relationships is, what does your dinner table look like? Are you guys using your phones? Are you watching TV? Are you doing homework while you're eating? Fully participating would be getting rid of all those distractions. And then we move to the how skills. How do we do this? So we want to practice doing this non-judgmentally. So we're noticing our judgments and we're sticking to the facts. One, mindfully, doing one thing at a time and letting go of distractions. And effectively, focusing on what works and meeting the needs of the situation. And so when we talk about effectively, that might look like, is dinner time a good time to have a conversation about difficult moments that happen throughout the day? If we know that it's not, then we're not going to do that because, again, we want to do what works. So when we take a hold of our what skills, the observe, the describe, and the participate, again, we're just noticing the experience. We're having a Teflon mind and controlling our attention. We're being like a guard at the palace gate. We're alert. We're putting words on the experience and putting experiences into words. And we're entering into and becoming one with our experience unselfconsciously, really being present in that moment. We're acting intuitively from our wise mind. Remember the synthesis of rational and emotion mind. And we're actively practicing skills as we learn them. When we talk about taking hold of our mind with our how skills, and one, mindfully, we want to do one thing at a time, let go of distractions, concentrate our mind. We want to be effective by focusing on what works, playing by the rules, keeping your eyes on your objective or your goal, and acting as skillfully as we can. And then we want to be non-judgmental by seeing things but not evaluating them as right or wrong or good or bad, ungluing our opinion from the facts, acknowledging wholesome and harmful but not judging. So this is the space where we might recognize that a behavior is ineffective, but we're not judging it as good or bad or right or wrong. And then not judging our judging. As humans, we are judgmental. We have judgments constantly, and that is okay. And when we practice non-judgmentally, we want to recognize that judgment, notice that it's there, welcome it, and then allow it to move on. Okay, so these skills can be really, really important when we talk about our relationships, right? We want to observe, describe, and participate in what's going on within our family situations, and we want to do it effectively, non-judgmentally, and one mindfully. These are the core skills that we want to start to look at when we are talking about improving or maintaining healthy relationships. If we are distracted, if we are not engaged, if we are doing multiple things at one time, if we are being judgmental, these are all things that can really, really impact our relationships. Think about that situation at the dinner table. What is going to yield for a more fruitful and effective conversation? Everyone being on their phones or doing other work or watching TV, or everyone sitting present with each other and engaging? Probably the latter. So when we talk about relationship mindfulness, we want to notice the other person. We want to be curious about them and use our five senses. We want to put words on the experience, what you notice. I notice that you are crying right now, and I'm wondering if you can tell me how you're feeling. Involving ourselves by throwing ourselves into the activity that we're doing with that other person and just being with them. And remember, if you didn't or can't observe it, you can't describe it. When we look at our how skills, one, mindfully, we want to only pay attention to the other person or your relationship at that moment currently. Being in the present moment right now, doing one thing at a time and letting go of all distractions. Effectively, we want to remember that this is someone that we love and care about. We want to keep in our wise mind the relationship that we want to have. And we might want to think, will doing what we are doing help us get to that kind of relationship? And really honing our wise mind and acting from that space. And then non-judgmentally, letting go of shoulds, good, bad, right, or wrong. So reframing those, what you did was right, what you did was wrong, or you should have done this, or you shouldn't have done that, to when you did this, it made me feel this way. When you act in that way, it makes me feel very, very frustrated. So we really want to avoid those shoulds, good, bad, right, and wrong, and be as descriptive as we can using facts.
even quantifiers, like you always do this, you do this a lot, you never do this, you don't do this enough. Like those enoughs, a lots, always, and nevers, those are judgments as well. And those can influence the way that we continue on in our relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, just to review non-judgmentally, this means noticing the facts of the present moment without evaluating them as good or bad. This is really important when we start to talk about how can we improve these relationships, because a lot of times judgments can get in the way of those healthy relationships. So ways that we can practice being non-judgmental is letting go of right or wrong, avoid shoulding each other and ourselves, look at the consequences of the behavior rather than evaluating it. So if we engage in this behavior, what is going to happen, rather than evaluating it as a good behavior, a bad behavior, a right behavior, or a wrong behavior. We want to stick to precipitable facts. We want to refrain from making assumptions about individuals' behaviors or motives. We want to take a non-blaming stance by using language that describes rather than labels. So similar to what I said before, when you do this, it makes me feel this rather than you make me feel, or like Bree said, you're always doing this. And then we want to notice our judgmental nonverbal expressions, our face, our posture, our voice tone, our body language, and try to change them. So we really want to be aware when we are in these moments and we are having these conversations. How are we sitting? Are we scowling? Are our arms crossed? Are we doing things that might communicate the message that we're not open to being in this relationship, or that we're not being mindful of how our body language might impact one another? So I remember once someone asked me a really good question. How do I start to practice these skills, especially being non-judgmental, if I am a person that has judgmental facial expressions or body postures? And so what I would say is start to really look at, how are you in these moments? How are you at the dinner table or in difficult conversations? Are you someone that makes judgmental facial expressions or has judgmental body language? And if you are, be aware of that, be mindful of that, and then know that when you go into those spaces, you need to be extra mindful of how you're presenting to your family members or your friends. And so these mindfulness skills, the how skills and the what skills, again, are really, really important when we talk about improving and maintaining healthy relationships, both within ourselves and within our families. So we encourage you to try these, especially in this time when you are in a shared space for such a long time.